Video discusses the question with reference to its origins, purpose and content. Assess the values and limitations of the photograph on page 150 to an historian studying the events of Little Rock in 1957. It's a source evaluation question, which is question 2 on paper 1. Quick tip before we start: use subject-specific vocabulary like value and limitation, but also other words not included in the question like hindsight or bias, as well as words on page 7 to 8. These will really show that you're acting as an historian, which is what they're looking for on paper 1 when you do your source analysis. You can evaluate the source using a 5 W's approach. So who produced the source, when it was written, and what type of source it is. It's all comment on the origins. If you comment on why it was produced, then you're commenting on the purpose. And lastly, if you can evaluate what it actually tells us, whether that's a value or a limitation, then you're commenting on the content of the source. The mark scheme for the question looks a bit like this. You must focus on values and limitations. If only one of them is discussed, you can only get half marks. You need to comment on the origin, purpose and content when you're making comments on the value and limitations. So if all of those things are included, and like I said, you've got values and limitations being discussed, then you're eligible for top marks. At this point in the video, you can pause it if you haven't already written an answer. But if you have, watch on, and then you can check to see how well you've done. So, in simple terms, the origins of the source are generally pretty good, but the obvious limitation is the fact that we don't know who produced this photograph. So we can't be 100% certain on its purpose or origins, which might mean that there's some doubt about its authenticity. But in simple terms, we know it's from 1957, and the fact that it's a photograph and the purpose seems simply to inform the viewer about what was happening in Little Rock at this time are all obvious values, because it should be reliable, authentic information and can be easily verified because the photograph can be checked against the facts that we know as well. What does it actually tell us about the Little Rock events? Well, there are some values. It tells us that federal troops were there, but there are quite obvious limitations because a photograph can only tell us so much. So give an example when you're telling limitations. For example, it doesn't show the abuse that they faced or the fact that state troopers actually blocked the Little Rock 9 from coming to school before federal intervention. Here's an example of a good answer. You can see that it's been organised into limitations in the first paragraph and values in the second. It doesn't matter how you structure yours, but have a read. How well did you do? Can you give it a mark out of 4? And if you're not sure, please ask your teacher.